Assatada Shakur. She was born as Joanne Chesimard, but the world knows her as Assatada Shakur. In the early hours of May 2, 1973, on the New Jersey Turnpike, a routine traffic stop erupted in gunfire. When it was over, State Trooper Werner Förster was dead, and Shakur, a former Black Liberation Army member, was arrested, wounded, and charged with murder. The state said she pulled the trigger. She claimed she was targeted because of her political beliefs. In 1977, she was convicted and sentenced to life in prison, but 2 years later, she vanished. In 1979, Shakur escaped from Clinton Correctional Facility with the help of armed accomplices. The breakout was swift, coordinated, and left authorities stunned. For years, she evaded capture, until reports surfaced in the 1980s placing her in Cuba, where she was granted political asylum. To this day, she remains one of the FBI's most wanted fugitives. The Bureau has placed a $1 million bounty on her capture. Some call her a revolutionary, others call her a killer. But one thing's certain, Assatada Shakur's name still echoes in the halls of American justice, unresolved, untouchable, and on the run. Donna Joan Borup has been on the run since September 26, 1981. That night, in Queens, New York, chaos erupted during an anti-apartheid protest at JFK Airport. Among the demonstrators was Borup, a known member of the radical May 19th Communist Organization, a far-left extremist group that supported armed resistance against the U.S. government. During the protest, Borup allegedly hurled a chemical substance, possibly tear gas or acid, into the face of a federal officer. The agent was left permanently partially blind. Borup was arrested that night and charged with assaulting a federal officer and riot-related offenses. But before her trial could begin, she vanished, released on bail and never seen again. In the decades since, the FBI has launched a massive manhunt, placing her on its most wanted list and offering a reward of up to $100,000 for information leading to her arrest. Despite countless tips and leads, Donna Joan Borup has evaded capture for over 40 years. Her last confirmed identity is long gone, and the search continues. Where is she now, and how has she stayed hidden for so long? Elizabeth Anna Duke. In the shadows of Cold War paranoia and domestic unrest, one name still haunts the FBI's most wanted list: Elizabeth Anna Duke. Born in 1940, Duke vanished into the wind in 1985, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and explosive crimes. She was a key member of the May 19th Communist Organization, a radical left-wing group that carried out bombings across the U.S. in the early 1980s. Their targets, the Capitol, Fort McNair, and even an FBI building, all hit with precision, all meant to send a message. Duke wasn't just an accomplice. She was allegedly one of the masterminds. In May 1985, she was arrested and indicted on multiple federal charges, including conspiracy, use of explosives, and assault on federal officers. But before her trial could begin, she disappeared while out on bail, and hasn't been seen since. Despite decades of searching, Elizabeth Duke remains a fugitive, her last known photograph frozen in time. The FBI still considers her armed, dangerous, and potentially living under an assumed identity. Rouja Ignativa, the so-called crypto queen, vanished in October 2017 after defrauding millions through a fake cryptocurrency scheme called OneCoin. Born in Bulgaria and educated at Oxford, Ignativa promised investors a revolutionary digital currency, yet OneCoin had no blockchain and no real value. Between 2014 and 2017, the scam siphoned over $4 billion from victims worldwide. As authorities closed in, she boarded a Ryanair flight to Athens and disappeared. In 2022, the FBI added her to its 10 most wanted list, offering a $100,000 reward. Investigators believe she underwent plastic surgery and travels with fake passports. Despite arrests of several OneCoin associates, Ignativa remains at large, her empire of deception still echoing through the world of crypto. By the way, I'm going to be posting a lot more interesting videos on the channel. I'll greatly appreciate it if you could show support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Thank you very much. Angela Yvonne Davis. In 1970, her face was plastered across FBI most wanted posters nationwide. A revolutionary voice in the civil rights era, Davis was a known communist, academic, and outspoken critic of racial injustice. But on August 7, 1970, she became the center of one of the most explosive manhunts in U.S. history. That day, 17-year-old Jonathan Jackson stormed a California courtroom, armed and intent on freeing the Soledad brothers, 3 black inmates, including his older brother. During the escape attempt, Jackson took hostages, including Judge Harold Haley. A chaotic shootout followed. Jackson, 2 inmates, and the judge were killed. The guns? Registered to Angela Davis. She was charged with aiding and abetting kidnapping and murder. Davis vanished, sparking a nationwide search and a $100,000 reward. Caught 2 months later in New York City, she spent 16 months in jail. But in 1972, a jury found her not guilty on all charges. Today, she remains a controversial symbol, once a fugitive, now a professor, forever etched in American history. Katherine Ann Power, a bright, college-educated anti-war radical who would soon become one of the most wanted women in U.S. history. Born in 1949, Power was just 21 when she helped orchestrate a deadly armed robbery to fund a revolutionary cause. On September 23, 1970, she and a group of radicals, fellow Brandeis University students, robbed the State Street Bank in Brighton, Massachusetts. But the plan turned deadly. Officer Walter Schroeder responded to the scene and was shot in the back. He died hours later, leaving behind 9 children. As the others were arrested one by one, Katherine Power vanished. For over 2 decades, she lived under assumed identities, working as a chef, raising a child, and avoiding any digital or financial trace. Her face was plastered on wanted posters. The FBI offered a $20,000 reward, yet she stayed hidden, becoming a ghost in plain sight. Then in 1993, after 23 years underground, Katherine Power surrendered in Boston. She pleaded guilty to manslaughter and robbery and served 6 years in prison. Susan Edith Saxs. In 1970, 21-year-old Susan Saxs, a Brandeis University student, became one of the most wanted women in U.S. history. Alongside fellow radical Katherine Power and 3 men, Saxs took part in the armed robbery of a National Guard armory in Massachusetts. Days later, on September 20th, they robbed the State Street Bank in Brighton. During the heist, Boston police officer Walter Schroeder was shot and killed while responding to the alarm. The group escaped with $26,000, funds meant to support anti-government activities during the height of the Vietnam War protests. The FBI launched an immediate nationwide manhunt. Saxs was added to the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list in October 1970. For 5 years, she vanished. Living underground, moving through radical communities, constantly changing identities. Her photo was circulated with a $10,000 reward. In March 1975, federal agents finally captured her in Philadelphia, ending one of the longest female fugitive hunts of the era. Susan Saxs pleaded guilty to charges of armed robbery and conspiracy. She served 7 years in prison. Angela Atwood, radical, actress, revolutionary. In the volatile spring of 1974, she became one of the most wanted women in U.S. history. A founding member of the Symbionese Liberation Army, or SLA, Atwood emerged from suburban Indiana into the heart of a domestic terror group operating out of California. On February 4, 1974, the SLA made headlines when they kidnapped 19-year-old heiress Patty Hearst from her Berkeley apartment, a crime that would shake the nation. Atwood, calling herself General Jelena, appeared in recorded messages issued by the SLA, demanding millions in food distributions to the poor in exchange for Hearst's release. The FBI launched a massive manhunt, labeling the SLA as armed and extremely dangerous. As the country watched in disbelief, Hearst appeared to join the group, deepening the mystery. But the story reached its violent climax on May 17, 1974, when Atwood and 5 SLA members were cornered by police in a south-central Los Angeles safe house. The standoff ended in a fiery shootout. Atwood was killed, her body found among the rubble. Her death marked the beginning of the end for the SLA, but the legend of the kidnapped heiress and the radical woman behind it still haunts the American memory. Sarah Jane Olsen. In the turbulent 1970s, one woman became a ghost in plain sight. Sarah Jane Olsen, born as Kathleen Celaya. A member of the radical Symbionese Liberation Army, Olsen operated in California during the height of political unrest. In 1975, she was accused of planting pipe bombs under police cars in Los Angeles, bombs that failed to detonate. That same year, she was allegedly involved in a Sacramento bank robbery that left a civilian dead. With the heat closing in, Celaya vanished. For over 2 decades, she lived quietly in St. Paul, Minnesota, reinventing herself as a doctor's wife and mother of 3 under the name Sarah Jane Olsen. But in 1999, after a tip and renewed FBI interest, she was arrested, ending 24 years on the run. She initially denied her past, but later pleaded guilty to possessing explosives with intent to murder and second-degree murder in the robbery case. Olsen was sentenced to 14 years in prison, but was released on parole in 2009 after serving about 7 years. Once among America's most wanted, Kathleen Celaya's story remains a chilling reminder of how a life of violence can disappear behind a suburban smile. Lorie Baronson, a name that once echoed through the headlines of the late 90s, was an American citizen accused of aiding terrorists in Peru. In 1995, at just 26 years old, Baronson was arrested in Lima, Peru, and accused of collaborating with the Marxist rebel group MRTA, Tupac Amaru Revolutionary Movement. The group was known for violent insurgency and a radical vision of social revolution. Baronson, a former MIT student, was charged with helping plan an assault on the Peruvian Congress. Authorities claimed she used her press credentials as cover while renting a safe house for MRTA operatives and assisting with logistics for the planned attack. Her trial, held in a Peruvian military court, was swift and controversial. She was convicted of treason and sentenced to life in prison in 1996, sparking international outcry over due process. After years of legal battles, her sentence was reduced, and in 2010, after serving nearly 15 years, Baronson was released on parole. She returned quietly to the United States later that year. Though never labeled with a bounty, her case became one of the most internationally scrutinized involving an American woman accused of terrorism abroad. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I have lots of interesting videos coming to the channel. Judith Alice Clark, once a name whispered in radical circles, became infamous on October 20, 1981, in Nanuet, New York. A committed member of a far-left militant group, Clark joined forces with the Black Liberation Army and Weather Underground to carry out a violent robbery of a Brinks armored truck. The goal? Fund revolutionary causes. But the heist turned deadly. 2 police officers and a security guard were killed in cold blood during the ambush and subsequent getaway shootout. Clark, who served as a getaway driver, was arrested at the scene after a shootout left her wounded. She refused legal counsel and aligned herself with revolutionary politics during the trial, receiving a sentence of 75 years to life in prison. But decades later, her story took a turn. After renouncing violence and showing remorse, her sentence was commuted by New York Governor Andrew Cuomo in 2016. Once one of the most reviled women behind bars, Judith Clark's journey from militant radical to reformed inmate remains one of the most debated redemption arcs in U.S. criminal history. Kathy Wilkerson. In March 1970, a quiet residential block in Greenwich Village, New York, was rocked by a deadly explosion. Inside the rubble of a townhouse stood the name Kathy Wilkerson, a former math teacher turned radical activist. Born in 1945, Wilkerson had joined the Weather Underground, a militant leftist group protesting the Vietnam War through extreme means. The explosion wasn't random. Authorities discovered the remnants of a bomb factory in the basement. Pipe bombs allegedly intended for an army dance at Fort Dix. Wilkerson survived the blast and vanished, while 3 fellow members died. The incident turned her into one of the FBI's most wanted domestic fugitives. For a decade, she lived underground, evading capture. Then, in 1980, Kathy Wilkerson resurfaced and surrendered to authorities. She pleaded guilty to unlawful possession of explosives and served just 11 months behind bars. A once feared revolutionary now lives a quiet life, but her name remains etched into the legacy of political extremism in America. Bernardine Dorne was once one of the most wanted women in America. Born in Milwaukee in 1942, She rose to national infamy in the late 1960s as a founding leader of the radical leftist group Weather Underground. By 1970, Dorne was a central figure in a wave of anti-government violence, linked to bombings of the U.S. Capitol, the Pentagon, and several police stations across the country. The group's aim? To overthrow what they saw as an oppressive U.S. system, by any means necessary. When a bomb accidentally detonated in a Greenwich Village townhouse in March 1970, killing 3 members of the group, authorities intensified their manhunt. Dorne went underground, vanishing for a decade while remaining a symbol of domestic rebellion and evading FBI pursuit. A federal warrant charged her with conspiracy, interstate travel to incite riots, and weapons violations. In December 1980, she surrendered in Chicago. Despite her years on the run, she served less than a year in jail for refusing to testify before a grand jury. Today, Bernardine Dorne remains a controversial figure, once branded a terrorist, later becoming a law professor. Marilyn Jean Buck was once one of the most wanted women in America. Born in 1947 in Texas, she became deeply involved in radical politics during the late 1960s and 1970s. By the early 80s, Buck was operating in the shadows, linked to both the Weather Underground and the Black Liberation Army. Her crimes weren't minor. She was convicted of purchasing weapons used in the 1979 prison escape of Assatada Shakur, and played a role in the 1981 Brinks armored car robbery in New York, where 2 police officers and a guard were killed. Buck was also connected to multiple bombings, including those targeting U.S. government buildings as acts of political resistance. Captured in 1985 after years underground, Buck was sentenced to 80 years in federal prison. She became a symbol of militant resistance, yet also of regret and reflection, writing poetry from her cell. In July 2010, she was granted compassionate release due to terminal cancer. Just 23 days later, on August 3, 2010, she died in Brooklyn. Though her name faded from headlines, Marilyn Buck remains etched into the turbulent legacy of America's radical underground. Brenda Delgado. In 2015, a promising 33-year-old dental hygiene student in Dallas, Texas, shocked the nation when she orchestrated the cold-blooded murder of her ex-boyfriend's new girlfriend, Kendra Hatcher. Fueled by jealousy and rejection, Delgado lured her hired gun, Christopher Love, into carrying out the killing in the victim's apartment parking garage on September 2nd. Hatcher was shot point-blank in the head. As police pieced the case together, Delgado vanished. Days later, she was added to the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list, with a $100,000 reward for information leading to her capture. Authorities tracked her to Mexico, where she had fled using dual citizenship. After a tense legal standoff, she was extradited in 2016 under assurances that the death penalty wouldn't be pursued. In 2019, Brenda Delgado was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Once a quiet student, she became one of the most notorious fugitives of her time, proving how envy can twist ambition into tragedy. Gina Tenny vanished from Utah in 1992 after her husband, Charles Tenny, was found brutally murdered in their home. The scene suggested a personal crime, intimate, calculated, and cold. Authorities quickly suspected Gina, but by the time they moved to arrest her, she had already fled the country. For over 2 decades, Tenny evaded capture, slipping through borders and identities, eventually settling in Thailand under an assumed name. Her disappearance placed her on Interpol's watch list and made her one of the most wanted women linked to a domestic homicide in U.S. history. Despite the trail growing cold, international cooperation never ceased. In 2015, Thai authorities apprehended her, and by 2016, she was extradited to the United States to face trial. The years hadn't erased the evidence, and justice, long delayed, finally closed in. Sarah Pender. She was dubbed the female Charles Manson. Sarah Jo Pender, born in Indiana, was convicted in the year 2002 for a double murder that took place on October 24, 2000, in Indianapolis. Prosecutors said Pender helped her boyfriend, Richard Hull, shoot and kill their 2 roommates, Andrew Cataldi and Tricia Nordman, over a house dispute. Though she didn't pull the trigger, she allegedly masterminded the crime. Pender was sentenced to 110 years. But in 2008, while serving time at the Rockville Correctional Facility, she pulled off one of the most shocking prison breaks in U.S. history, with help from a prison guard named Scott Spittler, who smuggled her out dressed in civilian clothes. For 136 days, she lived on the run, even making it onto America's Most Wanted. The FBI and U.S. Marshals launched a nationwide manhunt. She was finally recaptured in December 2008 in Chicago, hiding under an alias. Her escape added 6 more years to her sentence and cemented her infamy as one of the most wanted women in modern U.S. history. Wanda Jean Allen was born on August 17, 1959 in Oklahoma City. Her life would end on January 11, 2001, when she became the first Black woman executed in the United States since the reinstatement of the death penalty in 1976. The case that sealed her fate began on December 1, 1988, when she shot and killed her girlfriend, Gloria Leathers, outside a police station. Allen had previously served time for another killing in 1981, making this her second murder conviction. But what made her story infamous wasn't just the crime, it was the controversy that followed. Allen's defense argued she suffered from intellectual disabilities, pointing to her low IQ and troubled upbringing. However, the court rejected those claims, and after years of appeals and mounting public outcry, including pleas from human rights advocates and even the Pope, her execution went forward. She died by lethal injection at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary. The case left a deep divide. Some saw justice served, others saw a deeply flawed system at work. Was Wanda Jean Allen a cold-blooded killer, or a vulnerable woman failed by the system? Katherine Marie Smith. Her name became synonymous with horror in the 1980s, when a string of suspicious child deaths in Colorado shocked the nation. Born in 1949, Smith operated a private daycare out of her Denver home. But between 1980 and 1984, 5 children under her care died, each death officially attributed to various causes, yet all under disturbingly similar circumstances. The turning point came in July 1982, when her own 7-month-old son, Brandon Curtis, died of asphyxiation. After initially claiming it was sudden infant death syndrome, autopsy results pointed to smothering. In 1984, Smith was convicted of Brandon's death and sentenced to 10 years in prison, yet she was released after serving only 6, sparking national outrage. Though no additional charges were filed for the other children's deaths, the suspicious pattern remains etched in true crime history. Today, Katherine Marie Smith walks free, but her case stands as one of the darkest examples of serial abuse cloaked in domestic normalcy. If you enjoyed this, I'm going to be posting a lot more interesting videos on the channel. I'd greatly appreciate it if you could like and subscribe. Thank you very much.